Hello everyone. So today I'm going to explain how we are going to manage transaction using plain JDBC, right? So as we know previously I've already explained how we are going to manage the transaction using Spring Boot and others like using the transactional annotations and all in a microservice distributed pattern how you're going to manage the transaction. So those already I have explained. But now today actually I'm going to explain how we are going to manage the transaction using plain JDBC. Right? If you're going to use some core Java and the back means without using the Hibernate or anything else, like suppose if you're going to use plain JDBC, then how we are going to manage the transactions and how to use them in our Java program. For demonstrating basically I'm going to first create the database connection, like how we are going to create the database connection. For the beginner basically it's need to understand like how the basically the connections between the database and the programming is basically happened. If we are going to using the Hibernate or data JP, then those are automatically they are handled. Basically they have written the code in the backend, so we don't need to write any extra code. But suppose if you're not going to use any Hibernate or some external jars for this one, so how we are going to use like uh, manage the transactions, how you're going to create the connections, so those things. So first of all I'm going to create the connections, and then we will give some like after once the connection is established between the backend and the core Java, then we can do some kind of SQL operations like fetching the data from the database, insert data into the database, and also like how we are going to manage the transactions, right? So the database basically have some different types of data types, as you know, and the Java basically will different also have the different data types like string, integer. So JDBC basically will manage these differentiations. Like JDBC is managing the differentiations between the Java and the database side of data types. Okay, so if we talked about the transaction management, so the sequence of actions like SQL statement basically is treated as a single unit that is basically known as a transaction, right? So transaction management is very important for relational database oriented applications to maintain the data integrity and the consistency. So while we are performing these transactions, we can use some kind of the getter and setter method to retrieve the data, or maybe we are going to set some data in the result set object. So that basically happens. So gradually you will guys can understand like how these are the things happening. So now if we talked about the different types of transaction types, so in JDBC basically every SQL query will be considered as a transaction. So when we create a database connection in JDBC, so it will run in auto commit mode. It is a concept like auto commit, basically it's a by default it will be a true. So after the execution of the SQL statement, it will commit it automatically. Means suppose we are trying to insert some data, so by default, the auto commit is a mode is a true. So that's why whenever we are trying to insert it, so manually we don't need to maintain anything. It will automatically save the data into the database. Sometimes we may want to commit the transaction after the transaction of some more SQL statement. Maybe suppose we need to insert 3 or 4 or 5 tables. So now let's say one scenario, the first two is done successfully, and the third statement is getting means we are getting the SQL exception or some other exception. So what it will happen, it will only insert the 2 tables, but 3 remaining tables we are not able to see because in the third statement we are getting some exception. So that's why we need to maintain the transaction, right? So as you know, we need to follow some ACID properties. ACID means A means atomicity, C for consistency, I for isolation, D for durability. Atomicity means if all the queries are executed successfully, data will be committed, else we are not commit. Consistency means database must be in a consistent state after any transaction. Isolation, transaction is isolated from the other transaction, and the durability is if the transaction is committed once, it will maintain or it will remain always in the committed. Okay, so there are like while we're doing work with the transaction, then let me create one package first, uh, dot com dot ts dot bank dot transaction. Okay, let me create one class over here like transaction management. Okay, so for example, if we are going to create any transaction, so then what we are doing, first of all, we are going to either commit. If we are facing some issues, then we are going to roll back. So these are the concept basically. There is another point, it's related to save point, so that I will discuss maybe in a later part, but right now I'm just we will discuss about this commit and the rollback. Okay, okay, so commit means basically it's a execution after execution of the every SQL statement. We want to make sure that the changes permanent save into the database. We should can call the commit method. Normally what is commit means, it will make the changes permanently in the database. Maybe that after committed we can't undo or revoke the changes, but we can change the data in the database. Rollback means after the execution of the SQL statement, if you are facing some like issues or something, so till the last commit or mentioned, if we are maintaining in the save point, then sometimes we want to undo the changes. Okay, let's say one example. We have one nested query, one part has executed successfully and the other has been thrown some exception. So at the time we want to undo the changes done by the first part, we should call the rollback method to do that if any exception has occurred. And save point basically it helps to create a checkpoint in a transaction, and it allows to perform a rollback to that particular save point. So any save point that has been created for a transaction, that will be automatically destroyed and become invalid once the transaction is like committed or rollback. Okay, so while we are doing the transaction, so then we are going to like use some methods. For example, set auto commit. Okay, like initially we can set it as false while doing the transaction, then ultimately once the transaction is done, then we can say do the transaction dot commit, so the transaction can commit all the data into the database. If we are facing some issues in some point, then we can do the rollback. Okay, so these are the three things that basically we are going to do over here, and using this we can manage the transaction basically. Okay, so let's write one small like Java application, and using this I will give you demo like how we are going to create the database connection and how we are going to maintain the transaction. So let's create the code for it. Okay, so for creating the code basically, so first of all we need to create the database connection, means we need to establish the connection. So as a database I'm going to use the MySQL. So here there is a MySQL. So here already like I have created one like table like user underscore details. So here basically I'm going to do some activities like maybe we are going to insert some data over here, or select is for selecting basically transaction is not required because we are just selecting data, but while inserting data into multiple tables, so then we need some we need to maintain the transaction, right? So as a database I'm going to use this MySQL database. So first of all we need to create one class over here like class, then database, we can say database connection or maybe database service. Okay, so over here basically we can create one method like private static connection create connection. Okay, and this connection basically comes from the java.sql. Okay, now here class dot for name. So here basically we need to define the driver, so database driver basically. So as we are using the like MySQL driver. So for that, we are going to use this MySQL dot cj dot jdbc dot driver. So if you are using some another database, then you need to define this particular driver. Okay. Okay. So once driver load is done, then what we can do, we can call this driver manager dot get connection, and here as you can see we need to provide the url means the database url. So here basically we can say jdbc colon mysql, then here localhost, and then port. So for mysql port is 3306, then schema name. Okay, and here basically we need to give the username and password. Okay, so that will basically return, it will also again throw some exception, and it will return the connection. Okay, connection con equals to this, and we can return the connection from over here, and we can say we can log over here and database connection done, or maybe connection created successfully, database connection created successfully. Okay, so next, private public static connection get connection. So here basically we can check, like we can create the connection first over here, public static connection con. Okay, and here instead of this we can say connection con is equal to this. Now we can check if connection equals to null, then we can like call return get create connection. Okay, else we can return connection, right? Means if it is a null, then we can create the connection, else we can return this existing connection. So let me check that if it is connection is established created successfully or not. So for that, from over here we can create one like main method, main, and from over here we can connection con equals to database service dot get connection, right? It will throw the exception. Okay, so let me run this one then. Okay, what is this driver basically is not found. Okay, so why it is showing, as I am going to use this like MySQL database, so for that also we need to add the MySQL jar into our build path. Okay, so here I have added this MySQL connected jar. So this particular jar actually we need to add into our class path. How we are going to add this one? So from the build path here, right click the application, then click on the build path, configure build path. In the here like in the libraries section, go to the class path. Here you can say add jar. So here from the leave we can add this one. So it is added into our class path. Okay, let's run this one. Again it's saying this one, MySQL JDBC dot driver. Okay, this is the typo. D will be in caps. Rerun it again. No suitable driver found. Okay, JDBC MySQL, here is a typo. This, okay, let me rerun this again. Yeah, you can see now database connection created successfully now. So that means we are able to like connect with the MySQL database from the plain using like this manually created. We have manually created the connection, and using this we can able to access the database. Now we will do some kind of the transaction over here. So for example, if we are going to insert the data into the database, so let's say if we are going to insert one record into the database, right? So let's say how we are going to do that. So there is an approach, basically either we can do using the statement or maybe using the pipette statement, right? So for example, I'm for the timing I'm going to using the using manually statement wise. So connection statement. So actually for there is a two options for inserting a record into the table. There is a one statement, another one is the pipette statement. Okay. So statement also belongs to this java.sql. Tmt equals to connection dot create statement. Okay. And using this statement, basically we are going to execute the SQL. So here is the SQL. So SQL, we need to, I have already prepared one SQL for that. Okay, so that means it will actually execute the data. Okay, so let me show you. So value 6 is already there, so let me create as a 7. Okay, so once we run this one, then it will insert the data into the database. Okay, let me show you. You can see that 7 record is got inserted over here. Now suppose if we want to insert multiple record, okay, and we are not managing the transaction over here. Okay, so and we are trying to update with the same record. So for example, it's a 8 and again it's a 8. So what it will do here, actually you're not managing any transaction, right? Means we are just doing some simply execution. So once id is a primary key, this is the primary key, so that means it will be unique. So here I am going to pass two same IDs. So what it will do, the first record should be inserted fine, and while it will trying to insert the this same record in second time, then it will give us the exception. What will be the exception? Like the ID is already exists, something like that. So let me execute this one. You can see duplicate entry for 8. That means first record got inserted successfully, but while it trying to insert the second record with the same ID, it will say like duplicate entry for 8 as a primary key. If I checked over here, so you can see the 8 inserted got successfully, but the second row is not inserted. But if we are going to maintain the transaction, then either all records should be inserted successfully or nothing, right? So for managing the transaction, connection object having one method like set auto commit. So by default it's a true. So manually we need to do is a false. Okay. Once this is done, then over here we can say connection dot commit and connection dot set auto commit as true. Okay, and then also you can close the connection. Okay, so what it will do, it will either insert two records at a time, else it will roll back all the things. So let me 8 already over there, let me try with the 9 ID. 9 is not over here, so it will basically, once if we are not maintaining the transaction, then 9 ID should be inserted successfully. But Here basically I am trying to insert two records at a time with the same ID. So that means one record, uh, while it will insert the second one, then it will got like some exception, so that it will roll back two transaction, right? Let me run this application. Connection created successful but duplicate entry, right? So that means it should roll back. Here you can see the 9 record doesn't inserted over here, right? So that means either all the means record inserted successfully or not, right? So here how this is the way we are maintaining the transaction over here. So this is the basic thing. Here basically what we can do, we can also do multiple, like here I have created one table, so I am trying to insert the records in a same table. So in a real time basically, for example, if you are going to insert the data into the employee table, and with that also employee, with that also maybe department or maybe address, so those tables are also related to the employee. So once we are trying to insert record into the employee, so also the data should be inserted for the department, with that also in the address table. If suppose employee got inserted successfully, but somehow we miss, means there is some exception while we are inserting data into the department table, then it will not maintain the data consistency. So for that we need to maintain the transaction, and this is the way that how we are going to maintain the transaction using plain JDBC. So here basically I have tried to demonstrate the things using the single table, so that's why it is something like that. And instead of the statement, basically here I am using the statement. There is another options for inserting the record into the database, so that is basically called the prepare statement. Using that also you can do, and this is also very simple, not complex, like this one, not this one, prepared statement, this one. Okay, prepare statement equals to new prepared statement. So this is not new, basically this is connection dot prepare statement, and over here we are going to pass this particular SQL. So let me set as a SQL1, create local variable, refactor. Okay, SQL1, and this will be a SQL2. So for that, okay, we can also with this one, fine. So here basically we can like pass this SQL. Okay, and once we're done, then basically either we can execute this one, or if we are like passing the data as a dynamic, for example, like instead of that, maybe with dynamic parameter, because these are the static. So for that, let me show you SQL 2. So instead of over here, like in values, basically these are the like question mark, means we are getting the dynamic values that you can take from the user, and then okay. So 5 datas over here. So using this, basically we can set the data ps dot set int. Okay, and we can say the number of parameter, and here we can choose the like 9 id. Then ps dot set uh, string, because we are going to pass the like as a string data over here, so it will be a test. Then 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 5. Okay, so here basically we pass the data over here using this, and then finally using this ps, basically we are going to like execute the data. Okay, so now for the time being we are committing this one. So let me try to execute this one. Okay, okay, here is actually 1 2 3 4 5 6, but we have here passed as a 5, so we need to add another parameter. Okay, and here also you can add another. Okay, now let's try. Okay, out of range. Okay, the thing is that actually I've used the SQL one, which is already I passed the data over, so that's why it's causing issues. So instead of that, we can use this SQL 2 because it's here we actually pass the dynamic parameter. So now let's run there. It will work now. Yeah, now we are not getting any exception. Let's check the database. Yeah, here the data got inserted, right? So this is the options, another option for inserting the data into the database, for not only the insertion, basically for fetching the data into the database. Those are all the like things we can do using the either PPA statement or like the statement. So these are the like basically options, and also this is the option how you are going to manage the transactions. This is a very simple that approach I have discussed over here. If you guys have anything, please do let me know in the comment section. I will definitely try to like clear those things. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.